Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 8th of July 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, India suffers a massive price hike for EA titles. PC gamers not happy. Twitch and Steam team up to offer Dota 2 players in-game items for watching tournaments. Troubled Kickstarter Code Hero suffers further setbacks as website is down and alpha access withdrawn, and we'll look over the forthcoming releases for this week. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. EA simply cannot seem to keep themselves out of hot water these days, which is unfortunate because they're obviously trying to. However, it would appear that a decision they recently made in regards to Indian PC game digital prices is not going to go down well with some people. EA has caused a lot of consternation in India as a result of hiking the prices of PC games available via its Origin digital download service. Traditionally, games over there would cost between about 1,000 to 1,500 Indian rupees, which is about the equivalent of $17 to $25. However, according to the MCV India magazine, which is of course the Indian branch of the rather famous gaming trade mag, forthcoming games such as Need for Speed Rivals, FIFA 14 and perhaps more importantly Battlefield 4 will be priced closer to games released in the US, about $59 specifically, so that's anywhere between 25 and 3,500 rupees. Not exactly great, is it? And as to why it happened, well, the reason apparently is that gamers were using VPNs to purchase titles from the Indian store at cheaper prices than would otherwise be available in their region. EA has yet to confirm or deny this, indeed not making a statement on this matter in any way. Well, if I'm totally frank, I'm not surprised that we haven't seen this earlier. That's not to say that it's a good thing, far from it, but it was going to come to a point where having different regional pricing on digital games was going to run into problems, because there are ways and means to avoid that. Examples, of course, that I've spoken about in the past are these kind of grey market sites that sell keys from different regions, particularly Russian territories. Generally can do that at a lower price than what is available in the Tier 1 regions such as the US and Europe. It wasn't so big a deal, really, because at one point, not many people really knew that it existed. However, over the last year or two, the popularity of services like that, or just using VPNs, which are much, much easier to configure and operate now, has grown. I mean, a lot, and I do mean a lot. Way more people are using VPNs to bypass, say, launch date restrictions or to acquire games at a cheaper price. Now, to me, that does seem like the companies in question are not really keeping up with the technology, which is really quite silly. Yes, I mean, you can use a VPN to bypass regional detection. Yeah, I've used it in the past on Steam. I used it when I lived in the UK, considering that I was trying to do videos of games that came out on Tuesday in the US and Friday in the UK. I definitely used it then, and it was pretty easy to do. However, buying titles with a different foreign currency while using a card that isn't registered in that country, that to me seems like a fixable problem. And would it affect all that many people? Probably not. It would certainly affect way less people than saying, oh, you know, you guys that have been used to this price, well, you're going to have this price instead. And of course, the reason for that pricing in the first place was to try and combat rampant piracy in those regions, because you have a lower income level, so you can't afford that many games. As a result, you resort to piracy because, you know, it's a bit more important to pay your rent. One of the people in question that took to Twitter to talk about this said that it was actually the price of a month's rent in their particular apartment to buy a single copy of FIFA 14. That's ridiculous. That should never actually be happening, which is of course why you have those lower prices. It would be easy to turn around and say, gamers are to blame, you know, they couldn't even be bothered to wait for the sale, so they bypassed the restrictions to buy in a different country and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it is a free market, and what they're doing is not illegal. It's not their fault that they're looking for cheaper deals. More to the point, a lot of these key websites look completely legit. We're not just talking about people using VPNs, we're talking about companies that are making a lot of profit from actually doing this kind of thing, which as far as I'm concerned is what EA should be going after in particular. I don't think that there are enough people using VPNs to bypass these kind of restrictions for it to really matter, and even if there were, then all you really need to do is say, oh, you don't have a registered billing address in this country, then you can't buy from it. I don't see how that would be a bad thing. One way or the other, it was going to get to this point, and it's fairly typical that EA would be the ones to massively overreact to it. And it is an issue that we are going to have to tackle at some point. You can't have uniform worldwide pricing because that doesn't take into account the income levels of various countries. There are some countries that can afford to pay more for video games. There are some countries that cannot. Yet it is best to sell them lower than try and sell them higher, because you will sell way more copies that way and make more money than you would if the game was otherwise going to suffer like a 99% piracy rate. This is definitely not the right way to go about things. If you priced your games originally at that price in India, that's because you believed that was the price the market could bear. And I think that EA will suffer as a result of this. And you know what? It might be for the best, honestly. It's probably good that one company has taken the step to go super extreme with this kind of thing, because then they can note the actual results of that. I am willing to put money on the notion that as a direct result, these games are pirated much more, and the games make less on PC as a direct result of trying to hike the prices. I wonder, however, and this is going a little bit further, I wonder if they actually believe the Indian market is not large enough, is not important enough for that to really matter. Would they rather shut down the grey market trading and ensure that people in America are not VPNing in, or people in Europe or the UK, they're not VPNing in to buy a cheaper copy? Will that make them more money in the long run than screwing over Indian gamers? Because that's exactly how EA would think, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm still not going to claim it's a good thing. It's not. It is clearly anti-consumer, and dicking over emerging markets is a very bad thing. They will remember. Oh, they will. India is a very large country. We should probably not be saying to them, oh, you are third world and you are going to be ignored in favor of these other guys, because quite frankly, it will come back to bite you in the arse. Valve has announced a partnership with Twitch, which involves linking your Steam account to the live streaming service. As a direct result, you will be able to acquire items within Dota 2 by watching Dota 2 tournaments on Twitch. Before you get too excited though, currently this only applies to tournaments for which you have bought an in-game ticket. The point of this is that if you buy in-game tickets, then you will then have a choice as to where you wish to watch it, either within the client or on Twitch. This obviously makes sense, considering that if you wanted to go mobile and watch something, then you wouldn't of course be able to run the Dota 2 client on an Android device or an iPhone or something along those lines, or maybe you'd just rather watch it on Twitch than in the client itself. So, little baby steps there as far as I'm concerned, but an interesting idea. Very much so. I like the fact that there are actually, I think, an increasing number of companies that are realizing the value of live streaming games. Obviously, with Dota 2, it's a little bit different to Let's Playing a single-player title from start to finish. It is a competitive title. It thrives on the notion that people will watch the tournaments and that each game is different. And it's not the game that gives the entertainment, it's the people that are actually playing it. They are the ones that create the story, as it were. More to the point, it is actually quite interesting to see that Dota 2 is in fact continuing to innovate. Valve has always been a little bit weird when it comes to games, and that's probably one of their biggest strengths. The fact that they'll just come out with this wacky idea. I mean, Team Fortress 2 subsisting entirely on the sales of hats is an absurd notion, but it is the case. I mean, the fact that you have an entire both in-game and out-of-game economy based on this notion. Trading cards actually being sold for real money. They're not even real trading cards. They don't really do anything per se, but that's happening anyway. All of these crazy ideas that Valve comes up with is really quite imaginative. And it's interesting because I think, was it about a year, maybe a year or two ago, I did actually predict the idea that because Dota 2 had so much available for nothing at all, it would end up being a loss leader for Valve. But as it turns out, no. And not only has it not been a loss leader for Valve per se, but it also has not been a title that's ended up sweeping League of Legends and every other game out of the way. I think we now have a reasonably healthy Dota economy, whereby we've got League of Legends being the dominant game, followed by Dota 2, which is popular enough within its own right to actually subsist and create a competitive scene. We then have Smite that's trying to poke in from the side there. You've got more interesting, different styles of games like Awesome Nauts, and the genre being adapted and actually being pushed out to different playstyles such as FPS. Whatever the case, it's turning into quite the interesting little arms race. We've got League of Legends, the Titanic dominant game, and then we've got Dota 2, which bizarrely enough is being treated by some people as the plucky underdog, even though it is developed by one of the largest, if not the largest, PC gaming company in the world and has pretty much infinite money backing it. Whatever the case, though, I do want to see more interesting stuff coming out of Valve, and this is a nice step. Code Hero has not been doing all that well. Pointed out as one of the first high-profile Kickstarter failures, the project itself ran out of its $170,000 Kickstarter budget a good few months ago now, and as a direct result, developer Alex Peak has been taking contract work on the side in order to try and fund the continued development of this title. The website went offline rather suddenly a few days ago and stayed down for quite some time, which also meant that those with alpha access were unable to actually play the game. As it stands, at the recording time of this video, the website is still down with a 404 error not found, with the developer Alex Peak claiming that the website will be back live soon with a new release inbound. Controversy continues to surround the game, with several people threatening a class action lawsuit against the title for not delivering what was promised. Well, this is an unfortunate mess, isn't it? I actually did get a chance to play Code Hero last PAX, and by last PAX I do mean PAX Prime as opposed to PAX East, so that was about a year ago now. And it definitely looked interesting, but the game was a complete mess. We tried to film it, and it crashed so many times that the footage was basically unusable. The game's a really cool idea, honestly. The notion is that it will teach you how to code in Unity and JavaScript, and it will do so in a fun way, supposedly. It's kind of an edutainment title, which I'm okay with when it comes to learning how to code and things like that. You know, that's a valuable skill to have. But it barely scraped its Kickstarter, and the developer himself has admitted that, quite frankly, they just really weren't prepared to actually do it. The creator himself goes on to talk a little bit about it in an interview via Developer Online, where he says that it's important to realize that smaller developers who don't have a lot of resources or experience and who are attempting to do ambitious Kickstarters are not intending in any way to be scam artists, but they can run into difficulties and run out of funds, and that's a situation that we have run into. Well, yes, and that's the risk of Kickstarter, isn't it? More of a risk for the actual backers themselves. There are problems on both sides. Lately, we have been seeing Kickstarters run into difficulties, even large ones such as Broken Age, and then little small ones here and there. Kickstarters are being successful, and these games are coming out, and products are coming out. I own lots of things that I've got from Kickstarter, and pretty much all of them have been exactly as advertised. But I think there's a difference between being realistic with your expectations and saying, yeah, I think we're going to need this much money, and let's have a little bit of a safety net as well. Let's not go for the minimum. I think perhaps there are too many developers that are shooting for that minimum because they want to get the money, and they know that they won't get it unless they hit a certain amount. And we have seen several games come along that have unrealistically low Kickstarter amounts. And it's like, oh, well, you know what? We believe that we'll get more than that, or even if we don't, we just kind of want the money anyway, so we're going to set it low so it's more likely that we'll actually get it. That can very much backfire, but who gets affected by that, really? Obviously, the reputation of the developer gets dragged through the mud. Perhaps they are never able to release a game again, so arguably, it could very well be the developer that gets screwed over the most. The guys that kickstarted it are losing 10, 15 bucks. Okay, you know, it sucks that they are, but they did go into Kickstarter knowing that it was a risk. There is not a lot of legal protection involved in Kickstarter. Sure, you can sue, you can bring a class action lawsuit if you like, but more often than not, it's too expensive to do it, and it's just not worth it. Writing off $10 to $15 is easy. Suing somebody in court isn't, you know, especially if they don't have any money to begin with. If they ran out of money, what's the point in suing them? They can't pay you anyway. Even mass asking for refunds isn't going to work. Where's the money gonna come from? Where exactly? You want to try and explain that? The answer is absolutely nowhere, because there isn't any money to get back. It has all been spent. We will no doubt run into more situations like this. I do hope that Code Hero does eventually come out. Obviously, it's disappointing for the backers, and also just for a game like this in general. I would love to see something like this come out, but at this point, it doesn't look like it's all that likely. We will see. Hopefully, he'll be able to get things back on track, but the perils of Kickstarter and The woes of Kickstarter are always things that like to get discussed around the internet. Kickstarter is dead, claim many people. It was only a matter of time before the bubble burst. The bubble didn't burst. There was guaranteed to be some casualties along the way. There was guaranteed to be some projects that failed. But at the end of the day, the majority of projects don't fail. Yes, you are taking a bit of a risk when you put money into Kickstarter, but frankly, if you're not willing to take a risk, don't do it. It's like going to Vegas and then complaining you lose money. You knew what you were getting into. And finally, let's take a look at the releases that are coming out this week. Not too many, I'm afraid. We've got the expansion for Civ 5. Brave New World is on its way, which features a number of different additions to the game, including interesting historical sites, tourism, archaeology, the World Congress system, new wonders and buildings, and ideologies. So it's a fairly meaty expansion pack to a game that is progressively getting better. Since Gods and Kings, I'd say that Civ 5 is definitely worth playing. In its original form, probably not. Civ 4 is probably still a better game, but Civ 5 is looking significantly more enjoyable. It also adds the Pit Boss mode, which allows for some fairly interesting multiplayer options while you are doing other things. It's basically a system which is almost play by email. It's pretty cool. We also have Tokyo Jungle Mobile coming out for PlayStation Mobile. This is actually kind of exciting. Tokyo Jungle is pretty great, but it is a turn-based spin-off of the game. That's actually kind of interesting. I would love to see whether or not that'll work. One way or the other, that is coming out on July the 10th for PlayStation Mobile, which means you'll also be able to play it on PlayStation Vita. So if you're looking for some grid-based piggy action, I don't even know how to describe it. Tokyo Jungle is very silly. We also have Tokitori 2 Plus, which is coming out on PC on July the 11th. And that really is about it for stuff that is coming out this week. Next week, we'll be looking at stuff like Time and Eternity, which is an interesting looking RPG for the PlayStation 3. And that's going to be coming out on July the 16th in the US on PlayStation 3. And then we'll be looking at Shin Megami Tensei 4, which is coming out for the 3DS in the US on July the 16th. Alright folks, that pretty much wraps me up for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go though, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. Featuring tracks from Balance and Ruin over the last few days, because it's the biggest project that OC Remix has ever done, a 5 discs of Final Fantasy VI Remix action. Which one do I want to play is the question. We've already had a little bit of jazz, we've had a little bit of Jewish folk music, we've had a little bit of Wild West. However, this track by Beat Drop is not remotely like any of those things. It's called Toxic. It's a remix of the track The Unforgiven. It is a nice sludgy electronic mix. I like it a lot. It's got a good beat to it. So please do check that out. And of course, go and have a look at the full album, which is very much worthy of your download over on ocremix.com. Thank you very much, folks. I'll see you next time.